Hey, how are you? How is everyone? What's up, Brian?
Great, but I'll get better. How about you?
Oh no. I'm good. I'm hanging in there today. It's compliance season for nonprofits, so that's not that's it's getting me good.
Oh boy. Okay. Busy.
Hey Morgan, hi Mari, hey Nikea, hi Paola. I see
Hey,
Brandy.
Dr. Elephant.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's starting to rain. I thought it was over, but hopefully
It's
it's just a
one
little
more
drizzle.
day. We've got one more day.
Okay.
All right, we'll give it a couple of minutes and then we'll get started. Everybody's kind of slowly coming in. Miss Mari, how are you?
I'm doing great. Just trying to stay warm in the rain.
I know. For all the Californians on here in SoCal, well, Northern California too, getting hit pretty hard. Brian, I saw out there, but I think it was in Miami. I don't know if it came as far north as your area, but I saw it was a pretty nasty rainstorm out your way too.
Yeah, but it was overrated. It wasn't really
Oh,
anything more than a normal summer thunderstorm kind of a thing,
okay.
you know. So, but you guys, I've seen some unbelievable footage, like with rivers going through the cities, the street.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gnarly.
Where is that? I saw San Diego got crushed, right?
San Diego all the way up through to Northern California. It's been hitting pretty much like all the areas. The problem is it's not necessarily the amount of rain, it's that our sewer system here is not built for that capacity. And so the sewer system is, and the drains can't handle the amount of water that's coming down. And so that's really what's causing majority of the issues. And then of course, with the water loosening the earth and then the mudslides and all of that. So anywhere where there's those issues, just even in Long Beach, the freeways have been flooded and the drainage system just can't handle the capacity of water coming down.
So it's the entire state that's being affected.
From what I understand, yeah, because I was reading reports up in Sacramento and Northern California yesterday.
So where's the storm coming from? I'm sorry if I'm ignorant of.
That I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not sure if it's coming. When I look up at the sky, I want to say that it's coming out from sort of towards the west, but I'm not sure. I haven't looked at any of that report. But today's supposed to be the last day. It's been since Sunday.
Are you on the coast yourself?
Yep, I am right at the beach.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
How close to the ocean are you? I mean, you right there?
Yeah, right there. I just have to cross one of the streets.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, are they estimating damage at this point? I know there's a state of emergency, right?
Yeah, for the areas that were really flood impacted, it's really caused a lot of damage to streets, housing, cars, especially up in the hills, because that's where the mudslides have been.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
And it's so, oh, they're calling it the Pineapple Express, that right, for the atmospheric river's plum of moisture.
Oh,
So the Pacific to Hawaii, arriving in Northern California, and then did that. Ooh, cool. Thanks, Adelita.
Mhm.
Hi, Morgan. All right, everyone, we're going to dive in. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn with the Nonprofit Plug. We've got a jam-packed one today. I think I say that every single time. I'm like, how can we pack all of this information into one session? I know today is a really hot topic. We had over 130 people registered, but a lot of people, and just so you guys know too, we always record these sessions so that we can email out the recorded session and any supplemental materials. So this is during a lot of people's work schedule. So if you can't physically make it onto the Zoom, we definitely record it and we will send it out. So we're going to kind of dive in today. We're going to be talking about, are you grant ready, grant readiness, which also means, are you funding opportunity ready? Are you ready for funds from donors, foundations, grants, in-kind donations, sponsorships? Anytime we can see a dollar sign or an in-kind donation, that's what we're talking about today. Are you ready for all of that? So the first thing I'm going to really do is hand it off to the most wonderful woman in the entire world, Alex. She is the Director of Funding and Strategic Services for the Nonprofit Plug. We have a team of grant writers, but Alex really oversees that and has had a killer success in the past 6 months, bringing in almost $7 million in grant awards for Nonprofit Plug clients, along with our team of grant writers. You know, grant writing can be such a crapshoot. We're going to talk about what that is here in a second, but it's such a rejection heavy game. In your first 2 to 5 years, it can be filled with a lot of rejection, and that is normal. So stick to the plan, keep up the momentum, constantly apply. In fact, I have a little mini statistic for you all on that one. So Grant Station, who is what the Nonprofit Plug uses for our services, as far as a lot of grant research and things like that, which we do offer a membership to that if you guys are interested. But Grant Station produced this really cool report that's from their 2023 data. And it talks about, and a lot of people ask this, like, how many grants should we be applying to? And of course, you know, when you think about it, the more grants you apply to, the more chances you have to get funding, but you really want to be applying to grants that are in alignment with your organization. You don't want to apply just to apply because you'll be wasting money. But some cool information here from them in their 2023 state of grant seeking. Of course, submitting a higher number of applications increased the likelihood of winning awards. Among organizations that submitted just one grant application, 64% won an award. So if you're a nonprofit submitting just one grant application, 64% have won an award. It's not a super high number, but still pretty good. However, at least one award was received by 90% of respondents who submitted 3 to 5 grant applications, and 98% of those who submitted 6 to 10 applications. So one way to increase the chance of winning grant awards is to submit at least 3 to 5 grant applications continuously. This is ongoing, not just one time here and there. So be sure when you guys are working with your grant writer or your team that you're figuring out your strategic plan and that you're ensuring you've got enough hours and collaboration together on getting these grant application in. So I'll say that statistic one more time. 98% of organizations who submitted 6 to 10 applications were awarded at least one grant. So on average, you want to do about 3 to 5 grant applications. We usually recommend probably about 3 to 5 grant applications per month to keep the process flowing. So before we dive in, because we also got a tool for you guys today for your grant readiness, I want to hand it off to Alex. She is a grant writer. She's the Director of Funding and Strategic Services for the Nonprofit Plug. She is the subject matter expert in this. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Alex, to kind of talk about what is grant readiness, what is grant writing, and what is funding readiness, really.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it.
7
Hi,
million.
everyone. Yeah, no, it was a really great year in 2023, and we're hoping 2024 is even better. So it's exciting stuff. I'm very happy to be part of the team here at the Nonprofit Plug family. So thank you. So grant readiness, what does that mean? So I guess I'll start off with a textbook definition, which is that your nonprofit is prepared to successfully apply, receive, and manage a new grant. So what that would mean is that you have the administrative capacity, the governance, financial, leadership, and the programming know-how to not only win the grant, but also to make sure that the grant maker is satisfied with the funds they provided you. And ideally, if it all goes well, then they can fund you year over year. So that would, be able to sustain your programming and help the organization. So that's the shorts of it. Should I go into a little bit about what typically people need to be eligible for, just even the basics? Okay. So just for the basics, usually organizations will need their 501c3 status by the IRS and any state requirements initially. We also need to make sure that your goals, mission, and geography match that of the grant maker. We have found better success with local funding than some of these bigger corporate national funding sources, because they want to give and promote the communities where their employees live. So it's a win-win. And then they also usually ask if you lobby, discriminate, things of that nature, which, obviously as a nonprofit, you should be following the parameters set forth by what you said you're slated to do. So those are some of the basic pre-qualifications that most will require of you. And I did just want to note that since we work a lot with early stage nonprofits, sometimes you might hear that you might not be ready for grants, but we have seen there's different levels of grant readiness, and there are smaller grants, capacity building grants, or general operating grants that might have a lot less grant reporting requirements after you win the award versus a programming or capital grant, which might be more extensive. So there is definitely a range. You'll hear a lot in the nonprofit world. It always depends. And so we're here to help guide you guys and make sure that you're setting yourself up for success that's strategic. So.
Can't get myself off of mute. Awesome. Okay, Alex, that's perfect. So I think what we'd like to do with you guys is I'm going to bring up our grant readiness checklist. And we're going to go through the whole thing with you guys. And we are going to be providing this to all of you. So whether you're an early stage nonprofit or you're maybe 2, 3, 5 or plus years in, grant readiness and funding readiness is a constant revolving door. It never, ever is ending. So this checklist is something that you can constantly use over the years. It can help you with staff and task delegation and things like that. So let me pull that up. Okay. And then once we go through this, we're going to spend a good chunk of time going through 2 actual example grant applications so you guys can see like in real time what it really a grant application looks like one that's really gnarly, and they're 2 just very different applications, but one of them I think is actually kind of gnarly. So, okay. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, perfect. So this is the Nonprofit Plug Grant Readiness Checklist. It's also a great startup checklist. So the whole point of this document is really to provide a guide and details. These are things that are commonly requested by grantors. So you can use this checklist to determine which items you need, which ones to locate, review, revise, etc. One thing I like to do is I use this document to organize my grant readiness folder. Let me see if I can make it up. Nope, I can't get it to go smaller because I can't use my screen controls. Okay, I'll scroll down through it. So I like to use this to organize my Google Drive or whatever folder system you guys are using. And I like to organize it by organizational background, organizing documents and compliance, financial information, board of director information, program information, and then of course policies and other documentation that you might have. And the reason I organize it based on this is because this is typically in order that a grant application might ask you for some of these materials. So if you're working with a grant writer, it makes it very easy for them to pull information, to organize your files, and kind of get you guys organized and set up. So with our grant readiness checklist, let's start with organizational background. This is ensuring that you have your business address and phone number, history and background, your organizational narrative. So this is what describes your nonprofit organization. Maybe the history of it, some organizational facts, your statistics sheet, mission, vision, values. If you have staff, this is where you can list out like your org chart, your number of employees, your number of contractors. Great spot to also have clear your population that you're serving, your CEO bio, maybe your board member bios, and also your volunteer numbers and demographics. That's your organizational background. Any questions on that?
I
Alex.
have a question.
Oh, sure. Either one. Go ahead. Mari, go ahead. We'll get Alex after you.
I had a question about the population, the area. I don't believe. Did you end up telling me what area I'm?
Like who your population is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when this says population served, this is the people that your mission is serving. So for
Okay.
you, it's specific to your organization and your mission. You primarily serve women, divorcee women. So that's your population that you serve.
Okay, I understood it differently. I was going for the area, and am I only LA County based? Am I
Totally that's up to you. That's what you and your nonprofit decide on who you're serving and where you're serving.
okay? Got it. So that has nothing to do with where I filed or my address or anything
No,
like that.
not at all. Nope.
Okay.
That's just your kind of like your headquarters office, but you may serve women across the whole entire country. You may have a focus area of just Los Angeles where you live. You may even be as specific as like just Burbank or, city of LA. It's whatever is specific to your mission and what you decide for your parameters. Now, and everyone, this is a perfect example for everyone. So Mari, I really appreciate you asking for clarity on that, because you decide as the nonprofit founder, your population that you're serving. Sometimes though, when you're applying for a grant, if there's a grant that you want to go after, and maybe it's like the city that you're in and some other ones, this may be an opportunity for expansion. So you can tailor your readiness to grant applications and funding opportunities also.
100%. I was about to say the same thing, actually, like, especially if you do like Zoom meetings or start a group on Facebook, you could then expand the grant request to a more national audience, but there might be benefits to focus maybe just on LA County to get some type of grant.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really good question. Alex, I know you had a question, but 2 seconds. Adelita, hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
I love it so far already. So for this, I wanted to ask, so is this something that we should be updating for every grant opportunity, kind of like a resume? Or is this something that should be for the most part standard, and then that way the nonprofit has like a mission and we're working towards that?
Good question. So there's kind of 2 answers to that. One is this is your overall essentials checklist. So this is the checklist that you should have on the most basic level ready as an entire organization. Now, when you go to apply to a specific grant, they may have more or less requirements that's not on this. But if you meet everything on this checklist, for the most part, you will be ready for the most complex grant. This grant checklist is based off of for one of I can't remember what I was doing, but there was a grant I was applying to a couple of years ago. It was the worst grant application I've ever experienced with the amount of information that they wanted. And so I created this checklist to help me get organized, knowing that this was the worst grant application, that if you have everything in this list, you'll probably be ready for just about any grant opportunity.
I would second that. And if you give this to a grant writer, they'll be able to craft narratives based on this information that are compelling, that align with the grant maker as well. So yeah, this is a great start. This would prepare you for almost anything.
Yep. And we're going to send everyone a copy of this. So if everyone who's registered for today, whether you're actually physically in the Zoom or not, will get a copy of this grant readiness checklist. Okay. So let's go. I made it so that you guys could see the whole page at once. Is it too small, or can you guys still kind of see it?
It's fine. It's
okay,
fine.
Cool. Okay. So organizational background is one of the largest areas to be ready for. The second one is organization documents and compliance. Almost every grant application, I would say 8 times out of 10, is going to ask you for compliance documents. Your 501c3 IRS letter of determination, your EIN number, your strategic plan. If you don't have one, these are things that you can be working on. So go through this checklist, check off everything that you currently have, and either you'll be like, wow, I really actually have a lot of this, or, oh shit, I got a lot of work that I still need to do. So in your organizational documents and compliance, this also includes any tax filings that you've done for your state and for the IRS. Majority of grant applications are going to ask for a copy of your IRS tax filing. That's your 990 or your 990N. So be sure you always have a copy of those on hand. I would say maybe even for the tax filing and your IRS letter, they will always ask for that. almost like probably 99.9% of the time. Your annual state registration, if you're in California, that's the Office of Attorney General. Other states may have annual registrations too. Brian, in the state of Florida, there's an annual registration that needs to be done for your nonprofit, which you're going to get an email from me either this week or next week about compliance. So don't stress if you're like, what the hell are you talking about? But every state has a different annual report requirement. California has a couple of extra ones compared to some other states. Your W-9 is a lot of times if another entity is paying you, they'll ask for a copy of your W-9. You can just download that from online. But having these items under your documents, your org documents and compliance organized and ready just makes it that much easier to apply to grants. Adelita.
Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions.
No, it's okay. If you have the question, everyone does.
Okay. So I was looking at a state grant yesterday, and they were asking for a lot of things that I never heard of. I'm in California, but they want like the nonprofit to be registered with like the charities. And then so some of the nonprofits that I was working with are not and have never been. So for things like that, like how do we know if like at the federal level, at the state level, at the local city level, how do we know what's the range of things we should be registering for? So when those opportunities come, we could be ready for it, because now the challenge is that the state, they give you a 2-week window, but if you don't have that one registration, you're not going to get it in the 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the bummer thing, especially in California with the Office of Attorney General, that's the state registration that you're referring to. If they don't have that, it takes 3 to 4 months for the Attorney General to review and approve and get that initial application on there. So one thing that our firm does before every single client that we work with, we do a compliance audit for that specific state and federal level that they're in, and we identify whether they're in compliance or not. And that's how we find if they're meeting all of these or not. So for you, if you are running the clients aren't ready, just let us know. We do specialize in compliance filings, but this goes for everybody. Every state has their own compliance requirements. So be sure you're looking at your state requirements. If you're in Florida, there's an annual return. If you're in California, it's the Office of Attorney General. So each state is very different. And we do an audit on every single client when we first start working with them, so that way we don't run into any hiccups when we're applying to a grant. And then, it's so annoying when there's like one little item and we can't apply to a grant just because the nonprofit didn't do their state registration. It's so frustrating. So be sure you guys are making compliance definitely a priority, and this checklist will help you with that. So, Adelita, when you get to that point, just let us know.
And if your organizations are, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
If the organizations you're working with are really set on that funding bucket, it's very likely that next year that'll also come around. So in addition to getting prepared this next year, maybe building some relationships with the program managers over there and doing that would help your chances of getting it next year.
Yep. Okay, the next section, there's 2 that are big priority ones, and then some of the others that I'm not going to go over because I really want Alex to have time going over 2 example grant applications. So the other ones I really want to mention that are critical to grant applications, and almost every grant application requires, is information on your board of directors and financial information. So under the board of directors, the second section down here, grant applications typically want to know the number of board members, their affiliation, what are board members contributing, do you have bylaws, board member roles and responsibilities. And typically what we do is we create an Excel spreadsheet. We list out all the board members, we list all their affiliations, we list their contact information, we list and by affiliation, that means what's their role outside of your nonprofit organization. And then I always make my board members give a bio. So keep all of that on hand, because sometimes grant applications will ask you for a bio for your organization. A bio for each board director in your organization. So, and they want to also know the ethnic demographics and the board of all the board members too. So demographic data on everything you do, demographic data on volunteers, demographic data on the people that you serve, demographic data on your staff, demographic data on your board members. All of that needs to be tracked within your organization. And we're going to show you an example of why it's important to be tracking that, because I wasn't. Okay, so the other section and the last one I just want to go over, and I'll just briefly touch on the others, is financial information. So your nonprofit might be so new that you don't have a financial audit yet. Totally fine. Do not let a grant application stop you if they say they need a financial audit. If you don't have a financial audit and it's not a requirement, it's a suggestion. What they're looking for is, do you have a profit and loss statement, also known as a statement of activity in the nonprofit sector? They are the exact same thing. P&L, statement of activity, exact same thing. One P&L is just for-profit world. Statement of activity is the nonprofit world. So be sure that you take financial management seriously for your grant readiness, for your funding opportunities, and for the overall health of your organization. The Nonprofit Plug does provide financial management, accounting, bookkeeping services. So if you need that, just hit us up and let us know. But if you're doing it yourself, that's totally fine. Just make sure you have a process that you're tracking all revenues and all expenses so that you know how much it costs to run your organization or how much money you might need to implement and execute any of your programs. So having a detailed organizational budget, current year and previous years. Most grant applications ask for previous year financials and current budget. They also want to know your sources of funding, your top 5 donors or donations. So be sure that this is all information that you organized somewhere. So I like to keep a file within my grant management folder called financial information, where I can just go and pull this stuff right away or have it somewhere where I'm tracked. Any questions on financial information? Okay. And just some of the other key areas just to keep note of: marketing materials, brochures, flyers, narratives. Probably also good idea to keep a folder that's on your program information, program descriptions, your objectives, your goals, your evaluation process, your budget, any kind of partnerships you might have, anything about program staff, the population that you serve. So this is where it's going to be really important to talk about your impact data, people who you serve, ethnic breakdowns, demographic data, age, socioeconomic, geographic area, all of this stuff. So this is why I also have a separate folder in the Google Drive called program information. So it's really easy to pull from there. And then you don't have to, but if you want to have on hand letters of support, that are just kind of general letters of support. A lot of time grant applications will ask for letters of support, or you can provide them for just a more beefier application. And then have policies and procedures in hand too. Sometimes grant applications ask for a conflict of interest policy or a discrimination policy. So those are good ideas to have on hand. If you're a nonprofit plug client and you got bylaws from us, your conflict of interest policy is within your bylaws. So is your whistleblower policy. Those are within your bylaws, so it's just easier for board members. Otherwise, it's okay to have them as separate standalone policies too. Any questions on any of this grant readiness checklist? When grants ask about staff numbers, do we include volunteers and board members? What does staff encompass? Typically, staff is referring to paid staff on payroll within your organization, contractors, paid staff. The grant application will typically distinguish between all of these, and they'll ask for volunteer information and board member information. So volunteers and board members are not included in staff. Usually they ask those separately. Okay, Alex, I think now's a really good opportunity for us to jump over and have you kind of go through 2 example grant opportunities that are really based on this grant readiness.
Perfect, great. And then also with the grant checklist, if you guys do have some of that marketing material and stuff, like Dr. Sharon said, making it beefier, I like highlighting the nonprofit's personality. And I think that creates a more personalized approach and makes you stand out from the other applicants. So oftentimes, kind of more stuff, the better. So the first one we're going to start off with is Co-America Bank. It's a sponsorship, but it's we thought it would be really great to show you guys today because it's very similar to what we're often seeing in terms of what you'll need to be grant ready. Okay. So are you able to see my screen? Yeah, good. Okay, cool.
Looks
So
good.
this is the welcome page. Not necessary, but so first you're going to want your contact information in there. So your organization is going to need to decide if you're going to use your personal phones for now, or if you have a company phone. Email addresses, often for grants and sponsorships, they will want to see the .org. That's something we can also help clients with. But .com is typically, I've seen it be pretty fine for the most part. Organization information. So the name of your organization, that's going to come from your IRS letter and any official documents. So there shouldn't be discrepancies or anything between your paperwork, your address. And do note too, this is the question I had earlier, I forgot, but if you're using your personal address, just know that is public record and it's on the IRS website and everything. So I don't know, Dr. Sharon, if you have any tips on that. That should be just, yeah.
For the address, you typically just want to use your headquarters address, because later in the application, you'll have the opportunity to talk about where you're actually providing services. So this address is so that they can send you an email. Now, with government grants, sometimes you will run into an issue of using, if you have like a UPS store type mailbox or something like that, they want like a physical address. So sometimes you might need to use a physical address if you're comfortable using your home address just for the purposes of the grant, and then you can change it back to your headquarters. But here for this one, for org information, they're just looking for something that they can mail to.
Thank you. Perfect. Yep. Absolutely. So yeah, and also if you're working with a grant writer, make sure to provide the most recent address. So if you had a change in address recently, if for instance, if you're a renter, that's important information to make sure if there's a physical check component that it's being sent to the right place. Website. Do note, early stage nonprofits, sometimes they don't have a website. So if that was the case for you, we would put the URL to your Facebook page or whatever is showing a digital presence. Your email address, phone number, so, basic stuff you would expect. And then we go to the financial information. So this would be your operating budget income. So the first line item here is contributions and grants, and then it goes into program service revenue, investment income, which is not going to probably be relevant for majority, and then other revenue. So contributions and grants would be donations, grants you've received in the past. Program service revenue would be, let's say you're an affordable housing agency, you're getting some type of revenue from housing people. And this specifically asks for quarters. So often what you see is just they want a snapshot of your annual, but for this one, they do want quarters. So it just kind of highlights the importance of keeping good records, because people might get this detailed in requests. Expenses. So the way they categorize the different expense categories is salaries, payroll taxes and benefits, consultants and professional fees, travel, meetings, conferences, and workshops, insurance, marketing and communications and supplies. Oh, there we go. For going down here. And then occupancy expense, equipment, other office costs, and other program costs. And again, it's quarterly. So for different grants, they will have different requests and you'll need to categorize things in different ways. And so we can help with that. Typically, when we start working with a client, we create an organizational budget. And then for each grant, we typically create program budgets based on what we think the costs are going to be for a specific program to be carried out. Oh, yeah. Adelita, I can help you.
And so for these office costs, if your team is primarily remote, how does that work? Or how could you legally, or should you be claiming partial expenses even though they're remote?
So when it comes to office expenses like a laptop or paper, I think that is totally okay when it comes to classifying it under your nonprofit. But Dr. Sharon would probably have a better idea of like occupancy expense if you can write like a third of your home off as a nonprofit. I'm not quite sure about that, but office expenses should be okay.
Yeah, and if most of the staff is remote, then you guys don't have like a heavy overhead expense on that. But there are going to be costs to, like Alex was saying, the laptops, paper, pens, pencils, anything that you still have to provide. Or if some staff, even though they're working remote, have to go pay for a collaborative workspace or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, that's a good idea. And then for staff where they're kind of using like their own Wi-Fi, their own electricity, is it ethical or does it matter that we could try to take a portion of that for this, or should we not?
Maybe you put in your budget that you offer your staff like a stipend to, like a lot of organizations do, you know, cell phone stipends. So that's something that you could consider. It's really organizational dependent. So if it's something like a benefit that you want to provide as a nonprofit founder or executive director to your staff, you know, if the opportunity and the funding is there, I would do that.
Great questions. Absolutely. And a lot of times starting off, you're really going to want to go more towards a consultant or 1099 type employee, because a W-2 can take a little bit of work especially in certain states like California. So that would be under the consultants in that case. But yeah, that's a good idea to provide some type of stipends for that type of stuff. So this is just an optional upload. Top funders, this is another great point that I think people should keep in mind, is that a lot of grants do ask for the top funders. When they say top 5 funders, that can be through a grant or individual donation. So if you're using GiveButter or some other type of donation software, you just want to keep a record. Oh, this person gave $1,000 and then I got this $500 grant, and then you would just list them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you only had 2 donors or funders, you would just list them. And if it wasn't a fully complete list, it wouldn't, I think, preclude you from being looked at in terms of the grant. Yep. Adelita?
One second before Adelia asks her question. One thing I just want to note with this top 5 funders, if your organization is filing a 990, so you're beyond $50,000 in gross receipts, you have to actually submit this information on your 990. So it's very important that not only for funding opportunities, but for your compliance with the IRS, that you're also tracking this information. Okay, Ms. Lopez, go ahead.
If you went into a funding opportunity with a partner, like you both applied to it, and the partner like is a major funder, when you're filling this out, like if you're applying by yourself this time around, could you list that big donor here, or how does that work? Or do you have to like?
What type of agreement was it with the organization?
There was a partnership between 2 nonprofits, because one primarily did the paperwork, the other one did the actual and on the ground type work. And so they both received, I think about 100, well, in total, they received 100,000. And so now there's one organization that is being asked this question exactly on another grant application of, you know, who's your top funder? And so that was one of the biggest grants that they received, but they received it in partnership with another organization.
I would put the portion that they received.
Okay.
I double that. I agree. Yeah, that'll just be the most clean cut, and they would have the records backing it up. Bueno, okay, perfect. So the 990 filing. So we have the most recent IRS 990 filing. That might not be relevant to you. Sometimes if a grant maker asks for a 990 or audited financials and it doesn't apply to you, then we would use whatever bookkeeping software you're using, whether that's QuickBooks or some other type of software, and try to get some type of financials to the grant maker or sponsor so that you would be, you know, eligible, and you could show a little bit of a financial portrait of your organization so they would understand. Annual report. We had done a lunch and learn recently about this. It's kind of akin to a strategic plan, but it's post facto. So that if you have that, then this would be an optional upload. Keyboard leadership. We mentioned that as a key to grant readiness and the checklist. And we have templates in-house too for that, making sure that you meet all of the different requirements that might need to be reported in terms of the characteristics of your board members. Audit, this is also optional, so there's not like a little red star here. And then then we get into the nitty gritty. All right, I'll just read this out loud. So, income impacts. Are there any specific or special circumstances that have impacted your budget? They give the examples of a loss of government funding, in-kind expenses or donations, matching funds, etc. Any financial notes. So when these questions have arisen in the last year, we've definitely had a lot of people mention how COVID impacted them. That may or may not still be relevant. If it is, we definitely want to include that. Any additional details, like I briefly mentioned before, can help because they want to get to know you. It's like building a relationship, and they want to give their money to people they, believe in, and you show a level of transparency and stuff like that. So, organizational sustainability. So if you're reading this in any nonprofit thing, you want to think sustainability. Does it mean environmental sustainability, or does it mean sustainability of your organization? So just like, make sure to read that carefully. For this, I believe they're talking about financial sustainability. So let's see, identify future-looking considerations for organizations' financial health. So a lot of grant makers will ask a question related to organizational sustainability to make sure that once this grant period ends, you're able to continue a program, especially if it's a pilot program, AKA this funding will be the first year you'll be able to do it. So they do often ask, how are you going to get funded after this? And you will say that, you're working every year to apply for grants, you're working on cultivating donor relationships, you are, providing merch or some type of fee for service. And so you would just, let them know that you'll continue on beyond the period of getting funded. So any questions or notes so far? I hope I'm not rushing through this.
So this one, as you guys can see, this is a bank application. So all banks, for the most part, have a foundation and have funding opportunities. This particular bank with Comerica has a very extensive and intensive grant application as far as like all the data and the stuff that they want to know. So we wanted to show you guys that this is the type of grant application that a lot of organizations have, and look at how much detail they require. So this shows you how much work you need to put into having all of your material organized and ready, and be tracking data and having your demographic data and your compliance in place.
100%. Ms. Lopez? Yep. Do you have a question?
So it's along the lines for this last question that you kind of went through. Is there some kind of like in the nonprofit space, I feel like I've seen just so much variety, how they're structured, how they're working, where they're at, year 1, year 5. So it's kind of like hard to gauge. But is there any type of like institution or entity that does benchmarking? Like if, year 1, if your revenue is this is where you should be, year 2, year 5, year 10. Because things like, sustainability planning, like when do you start, planning for the next, so-and-so?
That's an excellent question. Dr. Sharon, I think you might.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are a couple of GuideStar actually produces some capacity building reports. So they're a good place to look at. Network for Good, I think, also does. And then the Council for Nonprofit Management also produces a lot of reports that show capacity building and where nonprofits are at. But what I would say is the second that you get your 501c3 status, you should be capacity building planning immediately. So if you're someone that, if you're the founder and you want to be the executive director and you want a salary, if your organization has to hire staff, if you know how much your program's going to cost, that's why it's really important to put together an organizational projected budget so that you can see how much money it's going to cost you to raise. And then, adding about 20 to 30% every year increase in the cost of, so you have expansion, scalability, staff to pay, more overhead expenses. But try looking at GuideStar, Network for Good, Council for Nonprofits, and you'll see a lot of really cool reports on sustainability and capacity building there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really good advice. And I would agree, Adelita, that there's so much variety, and each founder has a different idea of what success looks to them and different levels of ambition. And so it is definitely up to the nonprofit. And there's a bunch of different ways to grow and scale, like whether it's through partnerships or grants or fundraising and galas. Like there's so many different ways you could go. to increase your reach and impact. So great questions.
Alex, I'd
All
jump
right.
into maybe like just do 2 seconds on each of those different categories so they can see what really data is capturing, and then go into the Amity, and then we'll leave the
Sure.
last 5 minutes for questions. This just shows you how, like, these are very intensive grant applications.
Yeah. And what's cool about Comerica is a lot of individuals who might be working with the NPP might also have worked with Comerica. And so anywhere that you bank with, anywhere that you shop at, those are going to be some great leads in terms of grant requests because you already have those established relationships. So let's see. So please include the number of unduplicated individuals served on an annual basis. So that, you'll track that through Google Forms, paper sheets, whatnot. Age groups. This is a question we consistently get asked. The age brackets do differ based on the grant request, but 0 to 101 and above. Genders, so male, female, non-binary, other, transgender. Ethnicity served, so African American, Asian, Hispanic, other, 2 or more races, and white. And again, with the genders and ethnicities, sometimes they do vary grant to grant. Yeah, this one's it was pretty all inclusive, I guess. And then diversity, primary service population, same. So this has the primary mission of your organization to support one of the following segments. So basically your target population, it only gives you one option. So you'll just have to pick the best fit. Environmental sustainability. So this is discussing actually environmental sustainability. So I believe Adelita mentioned that there's people working from home. So that could be considered an environmental sustainability measure. People aren't using their cars to get to work and they're saving money by printing stuff out. And so there's a lot of environmental positive things going on when people are working from home. So, and then let's see, next, governance. Okay, so this comes to some of the policies that were mentioned in the grant readiness checklist. So equal employment, hiring, sexual harassment, whistleblower, conflict of interest. Some grants may or may not require also an insurance component to go along with this. And that's going to be up to you as the founder if you want to get ahead of any requirements before a grant, and like general liability insurance, sexual harassment, stuff like that. Please explain which standard policies are not present at the organization. And are all HR policies and procedures available for review by employees and the board members? So essentially, do you have an employee handbook that's being distributed? Particularly, I think it's legally required, right? As a W-2, as a 1099, they should have access to it, but W-2, I would assume it's legally required. What is the process to review and update policies and procedures? Does your organization have directors and officers, liability insurance? So that's a separate type of insurance, specifically for directors and officers, board members, et cetera. And then does your organization provide support to any type of international efforts? I'm not sure about on the compliance side, but a lot of grants will specify that they're either targeted to a specific locality, like a county or a city, and or USA. We haven't had too many grants come through that are primarily international, but I don't know. There's probably a certain level of complexity that would come with that, I would assume.
Alex, so we got a question from one of
Oh, good.
the
Okay.
participants. Should we always take advantage of the word character count? Sometimes I feel like I'm writing too much and maybe repeating some points, and that the funder won't want to read all of it. Ooh, that's a good question.
That's a great question. Yeah. And so, a lot of what grant writers do is making it compelling, like a scholarship or a job application. And the character count does matter, unfortunately. And the only reason I say that is because a lot of times in these grants, before you even start applying and knowing much about the portal itself, a lot of times they'll cut you off at the character count. So you won't even be able to finish your thought, and then the characters run out and you have to wordsmith it again. So I would say keep within the character count. Repetition is good throughout an application, and that you want it to be consistent and you want everything to sync together from beginning to end. But if you do feel like you're being too verbose or something like that, then you also want to make it easy for the reader to understand and not feel like they're, reading so many paragraphs and spending too much time on something they already know. So hopefully that answered your question. But character count definitely matters. You don't have to maximize the character count every time. You just want to make sure you're answering the question as compelling as possible each time.
One tip I might add, if you're having to deal with a word or character count, write up your response to the question and then go to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to revise your statement based on the word character count. And that'll sort of help be your second eye editor if you don't have someone else that's editing your work for you. That's a great use of an AI tool. Not to use it to write your grant applications, but to use it to help you edit what you're writing so that it checks for grammar, anything that's repetitive, or to just help you meet that character count.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always nice getting a second pair of eyes and editing assistance. Even if you guys are working internally, if you have 2 or 3 people that can check something, that's great. Yeah, 100%. And then giving priorities alignment. So before you apply for anything, it is really important that you spend a good period of time knowing what their giving priorities are and their giving history. You can see their giving history on their website. Also, if you have a tool like GrantStation or GuideStar that can help you in order to determine what have they actually given to the past few years, and does that align with what you're asking for? Because you would hate to spend all this time working on a grant and only 10% of the time they fund education initiatives and 90% of the time they fund homelessness, but you're applying for education. You definitely want to make sure they're aligned. So this is simply just asking if it's aligned. So they have 4 different buckets of what they fund for Co-America, and depending on the one you choose, the questions below it change. So some of them are kind of more interactive than this. So the first one, we won't go through this because it's very extensive, but you know, hopefully just previewing it can show you. This is for the last 3 buckets, all the same questions. So we can just go through this quickly. So let's say you have a human services program you're trying to get funding for. They want to see if you focus on low to moderate income populations. And they ask that. This is going through some of these grants too will be really great for knowing what you need to be tracking for your participants as well. So that's a dual purpose for this. They say, do you primarily service SNAP recipients? Is the funding primarily serving foster youth or other individuals still under direct supervision and guardianship of the court outside of the criminal justice system? Does this funding primarily service criminal justice system population who are returning citizens, system impacted, or individuals on parole or probation? Will 51% and above of this funding primarily serve court-involved individuals? And do you serve individuals who are currently homeless with basic needs, with wraparound services, mental health, healthcare, food access, or substance abuse counseling? So that is a idea of what a grant funder might ask in terms of alignment. And then we get to the request. So the request is going to be specifically what we'll be using these monies for. So let's see, is the purpose of this program, project, event to support one of the following segments? Okay, so this is what you said your target market was before.
Alex, do you
in the
mind if I jump
previous.
in for 2 seconds?
Yeah, please, yeah.
So
That's
this
fine.
is when you're going through your grant application, you see that they're going to be asking for a lot of organizational information, your financial information, history, background, service populations, governance. And then you finally, after all of that data, you get to the section on why you're really actually doing the grant application and requesting money. So it's really important that after all that, you have a clear idea of the information that you need to have on hand for your specific request. So the things that your specific program or organizational budget is requiring, what you're going to be asking for, the event demographics, if this one specifically for the bank, they always want to support specific events. Not all grant applications are like that. Most grant applications are supporting a specific program or some sort of capacity building, but a lot of times banks are going to want to be a part of an event so that they can have promo opportunities. So they want to know if they can provide a logo, what the reach is, how many people and things like that. So what I want you guys to keep in mind is look at, there was all those like 5 or 6 tabs prior to just the request of what you're actually applying to. So that's why it's really important that you guys go back and use that grant readiness checklist to identify what you have and what you don't have, so that you can see what you don't have and start putting together that information. So today's whole thing is recorded, and Alex and I really wanted to show you what an example grant application looks like. We only have time to go through just this Comerica one today, which is pretty similar to most other banks. The other one we'll probably do a follow-up to this session and do another training, is more a general application for a project that, or a program that a nonprofit may have. But this Comerica one is way more intensive than any, probably majority of grant applications, with the type of data that they want to know for just a specific event description. And so use this as your guys' opportunity to help you be ready for all other funding opportunities. So we only got a couple minutes left. Alex, do you have one final thing and tip that you want to drop to the group before I open it up to questions?
I would just say, don't get discouraged. Like, we love helping you guys get funding for what you love to do. That's what we love to do. And so if you don't have some of this stuff ready and you need guidance and assistance, we work alongside, and it's really great to get this all up front. But if there's missing pieces, we can just go along and work on these while we're applying to a grant, so you can take 2 approaches: get everything done in the beginning and then revise and do different iterations and fine tune as you go along. Or, start looking at funding opportunities, and as you go through the opportunities, decide what you need and then do them on the spot and then continue iterating that way. So I guess that would be my last little bit.
Beautiful. I love it. So remember, what's really important is that you streamline your essential documents and your details to allow you guys the most efficient process in your funding readiness opportunities. So I'll open it up to any questions. We've got about 3 more minutes. We're on here. These hours go by so fast at the Nonprofit Plug Lunch and Learn. Any kind of questions you have, whether it's on today's topic or just anything in the nonprofit sector.
I have a question if no one else is going to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you're working in the nonprofit space, it seems like predominantly a lot of funding comes in from all these, grants or fundraisers and things like that. And so, how do you stay like up to date on like tech out there, like AI, on like latest trends, like education and professional development? Like, where does that come from? Is it out of your pocket, or how could you like responsibly do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to use Mari as an example. So Mari is constantly sending me nonprofit networking events, mixers, opportunities. That's a good example of trying to stay ahead of the game on what's going out there on the industry. So I would, if I was you, Adelita, touch base with Mari. You guys would love each other, by the way, and connect. And by connecting, networking, attending local events, following nonprofit news, which is, there's actually an organization called Nonprofit News that sends out information, Council of Nonprofits, and these various entities, GuideStar and things like that, are constantly producing new tips. And we refurbish a lot of that too. And we come out with tips all the time. So being a part of things like the Lunch and Learns, looking for events through Eventbrite, networking events, partnering and collaborating with other colleagues in the industry. That's the best way to stay ahead of the game, and to be able to know like top of the line tech or cool tips, tricks, and techniques, and what sort of industry standard and what's out there and what's best practices.
Absolutely. And if there's a certain grant or funder that is a really great fit, most of them have newsletters you can subscribe to, and they'll usually send out prior to grants being released, and like any networking events they have or fundraisers they have, anything like that. So that's a good way.
Yep. All right, that's it for today's Lunch and Learn. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for Grant Readiness. Are you grant ready? So go through that grant checklist. We'll get that sent out either today or tomorrow and start marking through that. We'll definitely have a follow-up to today's session to go through a second round review of grant readiness and funding readiness opportunities. But thank you so much, everyone. Again, we'll be back not next week, but the week after, at the end of February. We'll be talking about more stuff, all nonprofit. Have a great week.
Thank you guys so much. Great questions. That was excellent.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.